The summer of 1899 hung heavy over Bell Hollow, a tiny town in Tennessee, where streets turned to dust by day and nights were stifling and uneasy. At the center of town life stood the butcher's shop on Main Street. It was always noisy there. Farmers bartered eggs for meat. Women gossiped while waiting for their orders. And it all revolved around one man, Butcher Samuel Weller. Sam was impossible to overlook. Broad-shouldered, in a sweaty shirt and an apron stained with blotches, he seemed to fill the entire space. His grin split his face in half, while his eyes, cold and pale blue, never blinked for too long. His voice was low and drawling, his hands strong and precise. When he chopped meat, people would watch and involuntarily fall silent. The townsfolk trusted him, though deep inside they felt uneasy. Once, a traveling salesman from Nashville stopped by. He left pale, whispering at the boarding house, "That butcher looks at you as if he's calculating your price." By morning, he boarded a train and never came back. Sam's shop glowed even after midnight. Behind the windows came a steady hum, either a saw or a grinding wheel. No one dared approach at night. The first disturbing rumors came from farmers. At night, wagons loaded with long tarpaulin-wrapped bundles rolled up to the shop. Dogs scratched at the ground and howled. And by morning the wagons were gone without a trace. At tea first, townsfolk dismissed it as imagination. But gradually, the smells began to change. Once the streets were filled with the warm scent of smoked pork, but now more often came a metallic tang that left a coppery taste in the mouth. Even the most loyal customers began avoiding the shop after sunset. 17-year-old farm boy Tommy Harrow swore he saw Sam dragging a heavy bundle from a wagon, too long to be an animal. Their eyes met, and the next morning Tommy was gone. The town fell silent. No one searched, but everyone knew. At dawn the smoke rose once more from the butcher's chimney. Women lined up, men shook Sam's hand and laughed louder than usual, but their eyes always drifted to the back door. No one asked questions. Bell Hollow preferred silence. By October, disappearances could no longer be ignored. First a drifter by the railroad, then 15-year-old Billy Harper, the widow's son. His mother screamed his name through the fog, but no answer came. Next was the schoolteacher, Miss Eleanor Price. She stopped by the butcher's shop for pork chops in the afternoon, but that evening her bicycle was found by the school, her classroom left with an unfinished lesson on the board. Searches yielded nothing. The sheriff, his face pale beneath his hat, kept silent. Woods and fields were combed end to end. No trace. Soon posters of the missing hung on poles, their faces staring at the townsfolk with empty eyes. By the end of the month, there were 5 gone. The newspapers stayed silent, yet Sam's shop was busier than ever. People said the meat had become especially tender, sweet, unlike anything they had tasted before. They whispered about it in their kitchens, but by morning still returned for more. Dogs no longer went near the shop. They were found dead in the alley behind Sam's house, their bodies giving off a strange, sickly sweet smell. In church, the pastor preached prayer, but his hands trembled. Bell Hollow hid its fear, clinging to routine. Autumn brought cold and fog. After sunset, the streets emptied, shutters closed earlier each night, and the butcher's shop was the only place still glowing. Through the fogged windows poured steady yellow light, and it seemed as if he alone lived in the town. During this time, 14-year-old Caleb Jones, a skinny errand boy, grew uneasy. For nearly a year, he had carried packages from the shop, and Sam always greeted him with a smile, sometimes even overpaying for his work. But at night, Caleb heard that low hum and the ring of metal, smelled the coppery stench that clung to his skin. He tried convincing himself it was just meat. But curiosity grew on a Friday evening. As the wind drove leaves across the cobblestones, Caleb made his decision. He waited until the light in the upstairs window went out, then quietly slipped through the back door. Inside, everything looked different. Without the daytime bustle, the shop was empty and cold. Lanterns flickered dimly. Hooks swayed as if in an unseen draft. The floor bore no bloodstains, no scraps, only boards polished to a shine. At the far end of the room, he spotted a narrow staircase leading down. Caleb froze, heart pounding in his throat. He gripped the railing. The step creaked, echoing dully. He took one step, then another. The silence below was thick as smoke. The metallic smell grew stronger. Caleb held his breath and continued down, unaware of what awaited him in the dark. It began with the river. One morning, the water carried a girl's body tangled in reeds. The current had dragged her miles downstream before fishermen noticed the pale shape. They hauled her to shore and wished they hadn't. Her swollen skin was cold, her fingers clawed stiff. Worse was the burlap sack tied to her ankles and a neat incision running from collarbone to stomach. Those who saw her remained silent. They didn't need to name what they already knew. When the body was laid on planks outside the sheriff's office, Bell Hollow fell into a dreadful stillness. People gathered in clusters, exchanging nervous glances but not daring to step closer. Women whispered, men grew grim. The air itself seemed weighed down with words no one would speak. For months, rumors had drifted through kitchens, churches, and porches. For months, townsfolk had swallowed their fear with supper. Now it stood before them, sharp as a knife. By evening, the town was changed. Quiet caution gave way to something raw, primal. Men poured from their houses as if pulled by unseen strings. Torchlight flickered across empty eyes and clenched jaws. In their hands they carried rifles, axes, sledgehammers, and pitchforks. Steel glinted in the flames. Women lingered on porches, clutching children or whispering prayers. Sobs, gasps, and hurried crosses blended with the distant rumble of a storm. Fear seeped into every window, every shutter. On the square, a restless roar rose like the earth itself, breathing rage. Names were shouted into the night. Names of the missing. Billy Harper, Miss Eleanor Price, the Miller family, Caleb Jones. Now a new one joined them, the nameless girl from the river. No one knew where she came from, but her death was the breaking point. Sheriff Amos Burke tried to speak. His voice broke in the storm of anger, his warnings drowned in wind and shouts. He spoke of law, of order, but the words were brittle, useless. He no longer belonged to these people. His voice trembled like glass, ready to shatter at the faintest strike. The torches swayed, sparks lifting into the black sky. Men roared, throats tearing with fury. Someone shouted the butcher's name, and the crowd growled in agreement. Another raised a rifle. A third kicked an empty barrel, the hollow boom echoing like a war drum. "Enough," one voice cried, and the words rippled like thunder. No more waiting. The mob surged forward, slow at first but unstoppable. 100 boots struck the earth in rhythm. The torches stretched into a fiery serpent winding toward Main Street. Their noise grew into a single, deafening roar. Samuel Weller, once spoken with respect, even gratitude, was now nothing but a sentence of death. His shop drew them like prey draws predators, the lair of a beast that had lived too long among them. Every step brought them closer. Every breath stoked their hatred. Women clutched their children tighter. Some wept, others prayed, some simply stared, knowing nothing would ever be the same after this night. The storm answered with a rumble. Lightning split the sky, and fat raindrops hissed against burning torches. Still, the mob pressed on. Sheriff Burke trudged behind, hand resting on his holster, though he knew one man couldn't stop a town. Despair shadowed his face, but so did grim resolve. If blood was to be spilled, he would at least bear witness. Main Street appeared at last. Narrow, rain-slicked, puddles reflecting torchlight. Houses shrank into darkness, shutters drawn tight. All eyes fixed ahead. The shop that IT stood silent, unchanged. Windows black, chimney cold, the door with its little bell almost welcoming. Yet everyone knew, within those walls festered the horror poisoning Bell Hollow. The crowd paused. Rain poured harder, thunder cracked open the sky. For a breath, silence spread, wide enough to hear the ragged breath of every man. Then one stepped forward. His axe caught the firelight. The rest followed. Noise swelled, louder than the storm. Shouts mingled with thunder, the air itself trembling. torches lifted toward the door, flames leaping across the sign, the windows, the walls. The shop seemed alive in their glow. The sheriff lingered behind, fingers trembling. He watched as a hand reached for the door. The entire town held its breath. The bell jingled faintly, too faint for such a night. And then lightning struck, shaking the earth. Torches flared, and a heavy shadow shifted in the depths of the butcher's shop. Years flowed like water in the river, but in Bell Hollow time seemed stuck. Houses were painted, markets filled the square, trains rumbled in and out, bringing and taking people, yet a shadow hung over everything. Invisible, but felt by every resident. Spring brought fairs, church bells rang, weddings and funerals followed one after another. Still, when night fell, people glanced toward the empty lot where the butcher's shop once stood. The ground there was uneven, dark, and any grass that managed to sprout quickly yellowed and died. No one dared build a house or even a shed on that land. Too much memory had seeped into the soil. At first, whispers about Samuel Weller were rare. Daily noise drowned them out, but time did not heal. On the contrary, with each decade, the secret fear grew roots. The elders told children stories they themselves dreaded. The children swore they smelled things, heard footsteps. The town lived as if balanced on the edge of two worlds, the ordinary one, and another where the butcher's laughter still drifted like echoes through the ashes. One hot summer evening, the wind carried that smell again. Sharp, sweet, the same as on the night of the fire. People locked their doors, but the air slipped through cracks. Houses grew stifling. Sweat ran down faces, and many rushed outside for a breath of relief. Instead, they met it, the cloying scent of smoked meat, thick enough to choke. The next morning, behind the fence that enclosed the ruins, they found deep tracks, too large for human feet, yet too straight to be an animal's. As if something heavy had walked across the soil, leaving the marks of boots, and beside them, long grooves, as though something weighty had been dragged. Rumors spread again. Some claimed children played a prank. Others said the earth had sunk from old roots. But at night, people startled at knocks like footsteps, and deep down, everyone knew. It was neither game nor accident that by autumn, the dogs began to howl. Always at the same hour, near midnight, their voices rose and blended into one long wail. They refused to approach the lot. Those that did returned with tails tucked, trembling, refusing food for days. The town council gathered to decide what to do. Young men suggested tearing down the fence, plowing the land, and building a new market. The elders only shook their heads. "You don't understand," one gray-haired farmer whispered. "Some things can't be buried. They choose when to return." But the urge to forget outweighed fear. That spring, they began digging a foundation for a new barn. Men worked in silence, shovels striking stones, earth piling up. On the third day, they struck metal. Hooks, the very ones that once hung in the butcher's shop. Blackened, charred but unbroken. Fire had licked them but not destroyed them. The workers froze, and in that moment, they all heard a low, quiet laugh. Not loud, yet it filled their heads. Laughter that vibrated in their chests, seeped into their bones. Men dropped their shovels and fled. The barn was never built. The land remained empty. Rumors thickened. Some said they saw a broad figure standing in moonlight. Others claimed they heard the scrape of a cleaver being sharpened against stone. Years passed again. People aged, died, and new families arrived. But the fear never left. Even newcomers who knew nothing of the past began to sense something wrong. They complained of nightmares, of smells, of footsteps outside their windows at night. Then the disappearances began. First cats and dogs, then a person. A young man named Jacob walked home one evening and never returned. For weeks, they searched woods and fields. All they found were his boots, lying by the fence.